Hello, can everyone hear? Oh, I'm so sorry to have one of those evenings or mornings here. Kenshin, welcome to you. And have you already begun sitting the Zazen? All right, well, please excuse me. Let's begin from right this moment here. Um, I would like to very much welcome you here today. It's an honor to have you. Uh, you are you're the teacher of Doyu, who will be ordained in April. And she's wonderful and has spoken about you only in beautiful, beautiful terms to me. Um, and that's all I needed to know because I know Doyu. She's going to be a wonderful Soto Zen priest. Doyu, may I ask you? I'm going to ask Doyu, would you introduce your teacher for us and tell us a little about her?
We have two mics going. This is Kenshin Cascade. Mute. It's going around and around. All right, maybe I can do it. Turn it on. Okay. Is it on? Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. This is Kenshin Catherine Cascade. And we've known each other since, I think, 1975 or 76. And she can speak to what she did in the intervening years more easily than I can, but I can speak to what I did, which is that I wandered in the dark until 7 years ago when discovering she had returned to the area teaching Soto Zen. I came for a visit to check her out and knew within seconds that this was my teacher. It's your time to speak.
Okay. Would you like me to say more about myself, Jundoroshi? So, as Doyu mentioned, we've known each other for a very long time. And my spiritual journey began even before that time. I was originally ordained in the Order of Buddhist Contemplatives at Shasta Abbey in 1999. And that is a cloistered order. And after a time, I left the Abbey and found a new teacher, and we did a transfer of discipleship. So my teacher now is Hozan Kushiki Alan Sanaki. He is the vice abbot at Berkeley Zen Center in the Suzuki Roshi lineage. So I went to Berkeley Zen Center to live and practice with him for about 5 years. And then, as Doyu said, I came back like a homing pigeon to rural Western Oregon, and with my partner, who's also a Soto Zen priest, and we we began a little home-style zendo called Birdhaven Zendo. Here, we're in a wooded area, away is about 25 miles from Eugene. And we are Doyu's brick and mortar Sangha. And I've been very happy to learn more about the Tree Leaf Sangha, which offers her wonderful opportunities to practice more intensively than otherwise would be the case, with a wonderful teacher and wonderful Sangha brothers and sisters. So when you're as old as I am, you could go on and on to introduce yourself, but I think that's enough.
What's going on
Do I need to mute so we can hear Jundo?
here? No. If you speak English, people hear me. Back to you, Jundo.
Oh, sorry, it's one of those mornings. I'm not used to Zoom. We're going to sit for about 25 minutes, and then we will welcome a talk from Kenshin. I will ring the bell if I may. Can you hear me? All right. Well, again, I'd like to give a, proper welcome to Reverend Kenshin for being here. And without further ado, now that we're all together, if you may, I would like to turn things over to you and ask if you would honor us with a talk.
Thank you. I want to, I'm just starting to cough a little bit. I want to let you know that I'm not sick. I have allergies. So very many of us here in our neck of the woods are allergic to things. So hello, everyone. Everyone seen and unseen. Here we are together. And here is Mahapajapati. And she is the Buddha's aunt and foster mother and the founder of the Women's Sangha. And she stands at the entrance to our little zendo. And every time I pass her, I feel grateful. Grateful because without her, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here as I am. The ancestors, especially these very early ones from the time of the Buddha, can seem pretty distant. But for me, she's very personal. And I want to tell you about her. I'm going to try to see myself a little better here. Elio, can you help me? Speaker view. There we go.
Yes.
That's a little better. As you can tell, I'm new to Zoom, not totally brand new, but learning thanks to Doyu here. So I'm going to tell her story today. We don't know very much about her verbal teaching. There's just one small poem in the Therigatha, the Enlightenment poems of the first Buddhist women. But there's powerful teaching in the story of her life. And we don't know, after all these years, exactly what happened. There's elements of legend along with elements of verifiable history. But it's the story we have, and it's an important story. It's the origin story of the Women's Sangha. And it can be a hard story to hear. Hard because women were barred from the Buddhist Sangha at the beginning. And when Mahapajapati asked to enter, Shakyamuni Buddha said no, again and again. So it's hard to take that in. But it's a story that, looking deeply, has a lot of rich nourishment and encouragement for all of us. It's a story about women, but it's really a story for a lot more people, because it's a story about meeting a barrier, an external barrier in the world of causes and conditions. And lots of people meet that kind of barrier. It could be a social barrier if you're trans. It could be a cultural barrier if you're queer. It could be an architectural barrier if you're in a wheelchair. It could be a geographic barrier if you live in an isolated area. It could be a legal barrier if you're an immigrant. It could be a religious barrier if you're a Muslim wanting to enter the United States. Anything that otherizes people and seeks to exclude, that leads to exclusion. So one of the most wonderful things for me to get to know about Tree Leaf Sangha is the fact that you have, along with a women ancestors document, you have another document that honors the ancestors who were excluded for other reasons. And I'm just going to read Juno Roshi's wonderful dedication that accompanies that ancestors document. It's dedicated to those who have, and I'm quoting here, encountered barriers of sex and birth, those of different body and special mind, so often misunderstood by the many, those who may have been met with exclusion or fear, those for whom the path was filled with obstacles and barriers. We honor those for whom entrance was so often denied and halls once barred, end quote. So Mahapajapati's story is for all of us. In wheelchairs, in bed, in bodies of color, trans, non-binary, queer, female, fat, and for the allies who can and do make such a difference. Sometimes the allies are lending a helping hand for us, and sometimes we are the allies lending a helping hand for others. And there's a wonderful ally in Mahapajapati's story. So there's a classic collection of Zen koans called the Gateless Barrier, sometimes called the Gateless Gate. And it's about barriers in the mind. And that's a part of the story as well, an important part of the story. But the first barrier that Mahapajapati encounters is an external barrier in the world of causes and conditions. When she wants to enter the Buddhist Sangha, she's told, no, you can't come in. At that time, the Buddhist Sangha was male monastics. We now count 4 parts of the Buddhist Sangha: lay women, lay men, monastic or priest-ordained women, and monastic or priest-ordained men. But at that time, there was only one part, and it was monastic men. So I'll tell the story as it's told in the Kalavaga. Kalavaga is a part of the Vinaya Pitaka, which is part of the Pali Canon. And as I said, this is the story we have. We don't know what really happened, or not very much of it in a way that stands up to the standards of professional historians. It partakes of legend as much as it partakes of that kind of history. But it's the story we have. So the Buddha's mother was Maya, and she and her sister Pajapati were married to the same man, King Suddhodana, and that was quite common at the time. So when Maya died several days after the Buddha's birth, Pajapati quite naturally stepped in, picked him up, and breastfed him along with her own child and raised him up as his foster mother. She was responsible for all the aspects of his well being, as parents are, his health, his education, his happiness. So after the Buddha's enlightenment, Pajapati was widowed, and she wanted to do what so very many of the men in the Buddha's community were doing, which was leaving home to follow him, to devote their lives to the path of practice. And she wanted to do that too. So she went to Shakyamuni Buddha, and she asked, she said she wanted to join the Sangha. And he said, enough, Gautami. Don't set your heart on women being allowed to do this. So Pajapati was a respected older woman in her community. You can see this statue is of an older woman's body, a flesh and blood older woman. And she was respected in her community. People had confidence in her. Other women had confidence in her. And it was their husbands and brothers and sons and fathers who had also left home to follow the Buddha. And like Pajapati, they wanted to go too. So they joined her. They thought, well, we'll try again. So they went to Shakyamuni Buddha and asked all together now to join the Sangha. And again, he said, enough, Gautami. Don't set your heart on women being allowed to do this. So the group continued to grow. The Kalavaga says there were 500 women, which was just a sort of a colloquial way of saying really, really a lot. And they gathered together, and undaunted by these refusals, they shaved off their own head. They put on the saffron robes that were the mark of spiritual seekers at the time. And they continued to follow the Buddha as he wandered the countryside, teaching the Dharma. And in that culture, you were allowed to ask 3 times. If you got a no the first 2 times, you still had 1 time left. So all together, this big crowd of women, all dusty and tired, and with, the story says, bleeding feet, came to where the Buddha was and asked again. And again, the Buddha said no. So now Pajapati was in real distress. She and everyone with her really wanted to be included. She was weeping. And at that point, Ananda saw her. He saw her and said, well, Let me see if I can help. So he went to the Buddha and said, look, they're out there. They're right at your front porch. They really want to come in. He said, no, don't ask. Don't ask. So Ananda withdrew. Who knows what he thought? Maybe he thought, well, maybe the guy's just having a bad day. I'll try again. He asked again. The Buddha said, no, don't ask, Ananda. And a third time, no, don't ask. So Ananda also was undaunted, and he thought, well, maybe I need to come in from a different angle. So he said, so tell me then, is it true that women cannot achieve enlightenment the same as men? And the Buddha thought it over and allowed his how, well, yeah, women can achieve enlightenment the same as men. So Ananda said to him, you owe her. She fed you at her breast. She nourished you. She raised you up. She took care of you. You wouldn't be here without her. And at that point, the Buddha agreed. Okay. And the Women's Sangha was established under Mahapajapati's leadership. Maha means great, great Pajapati. And she experienced enlightenment. She woke up, and her enlightenment was said to be as great as that of Shakyamuni Buddha. So Mahapajapati and the 500 women wanted inclusion. Of course they did. There were real benefits and real barriers to the benefits of being a part of the Sangha together with everybody else. So they persisted. And with the help of Ananda as an ally, they finally succeeded in opening that gate, for women. And that continues to bear fruit throughout the world down to the present time. But the story offers something even more deeply nourishing and encouraging than that success. You win some, you lose some. Because it's a story of liberation that's very close to the heart of the Buddha Dharma itself. Because by the time that Mahapajapati and the 500 women were admitted to the Buddhist Sangha, they had already met and passed through or seen through another barrier, a barrier in their own minds, a barrier created by the belief that what was on the other side of that gate that wouldn't open was the most important thing, was something they had to have in order to be okay, in order to live worthwhile lives, in order to live fully lives of value. And that barrier of thinking they had to have something they didn't have, was the cause of their greatest suffering. somewhere in the middle of the struggle, Mahapajapati began to see through that barrier that was erected in the world of causes and conditions, to something more fundamental, to something she had access to. She and all those 500 women had access to, regardless of what happened in the world of causes and conditions. She began to see in herself and in the 500 women she began to see their own inherent worthiness. Excuse me. Their own true nature, unstained and unhindered, no matter what. And affirming her own worthiness and seeing her own worthiness mirrored in others, in all those 500 women, courage arose, strength of heart, and they simply took the next step. They shaved their heads, they put on saffron robes, and they set out on the path of practice, the path of liberation that is always open to all beings, free of the belief that there was something essential outside themselves to be attained, something they had to have in order to be fully worthy human beings. The Heart Sutra says, with nothing to attain, the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fear exists. So here's Mahapajapati, and we see her, here we go, with two mudras. With her right hand, she's offering the mudra of fearlessness. This is also the teaching mudra. With her left hand, which is down, she's offering the mudra of welcome, of welcome, of greeting. But when I think about her and the 500 women going forth on the path, and I think about that mudra, it seems to me to be revelatory. It seems to me to be saying, this is it. This is it right here, right now, right in front of you. Just take the next step. You belong here. You're welcome here. Right here in the middle of your own life, just as it is. And I think that this is, for me anyway, it's reminiscent of the part of the Buddha's own story of his enlightenment, where he's sitting under the Bodhi tree and Mara has pulled out all the temptations and all the challenges that he can. And finally, he's kind of run out of all the things that he thinks might be tempting, and the Buddha just sat like a mountain. He tries the last thing in his bag of tricks. He says, who do you think you are? On whose authority are you doing this? Who told you you could do this? Who told you you could sit down here and eventually wake up? Who told you? And the Buddha touches the earth to bear witness to his right to be there, to his right to be on the path of practice and of liberation, to be on the path of waking up. So this is her teaching to us. Not so much a breaking through barriers as a seeing through. And as we all know, many barriers excluding people still exist. Many gates still need to be opened. But there is a seeing through that makes it possible to live a liberated life regardless of what happens, regardless of the barriers erected in the world of causes and conditions. So this is a story about meeting barriers, both internal and external. And it's a story about Sangha, about gathering together, about seeing ourselves, seeing each other, seeing our own true nature, seeing and being seen, and about how we need each other. It's a story about creating the Sangha, which is the third of the three treasures, the three gems. Buddha, waking up, awakening mind. Dharma, the truth about how things really are. And Sangha, all of us together. No separation. No enduring separate self-identity. All of us with the same true nature gathered together. So the first time Mahapajapati came alone, but the second time she came with others. She had confidence in herself. They had confidence in her. Seeing their confidence increased her own confidence in herself. So seeing and encouraging each other, they created the Sangha treasure in that way. And in that thing that we do in Sangha over and over again, bowing to each other. Is this what we're doing? Is this what we're acknowledging? I see you. I'm willing for you to see me. And then Ananda saw them, saw that they were no different, their true nature was no different from his own. And he helped the Buddha see as well. So this story doesn't make the Buddha look too good. We're often, we Buddhists, have some tendency to kind of deify the Buddha, make him into somebody different from ourselves, more special. But I think one of the most encouraging things in this story is that you don't have to be perfect to wake up. You don't have to be perfect to see Buddha nature in yourself and others. It's a practice for real human beings. Even the Buddha had a blind spot. Even the Buddha needed an ally. Ananda was an ally to the Buddha as well as an ally to Mahapajapati and the 500 women. He needed an ally, a good spiritual friend to help him see. So if even the Buddha needed help, if even the Buddha had a blind spot, there's hope for all of us. Sometimes I'm the one meeting the barrier, and sometimes I'm the one with the blind spot. Who do I make into the other? Who can't I see? So this koan that plays out in Mahapajapati's story is one that I think many of you are very familiar with in your own life in its various aspects. So I'd like to open it up now to discussion and ask, what's your experience in meeting a barrier and finding what is unhindered in yourself?
Thank you so much, Kenshin Roshi. That was a very poignant talk for many of us at Tree Leaf in many, many ways, which I'll ask you about a little later. In the first, I just want to say thank you again for being here. And I would like to open this to anyone's questions. I know our priests all do have questions for you. And our members are here from many, many places. Please, I encourage everyone, don't be shy. Anyone at home who has a question, there are some people watching one way. I will be checking my PM, my private messages at Tree Leaf every few minutes. So type up a question and send it if there is anything. Anyone here have a question? Question? Jacodan.
Thank you very much. That was a beautiful talk. We run into, I think, a lot of the barriers you're talking about as priests at Tree Leaf. There seems to be a blind spot in institutionalized Zen that it's hard enough to be a priest because there's always some of that imposter syndrome going on, I think, in any circumstance, that how can I be good enough or perfect enough or practice the right way to be a priest in the first place. And then you add to the barrier that we can't practice the way we do because we're at home in life, and there's the whole distinction between lay and monastic, and so it really speaks to what we do here. Do you have any advice for, I guess you've given us your advice as to find allies, and we certainly have those in our community here. We're very comfortable with what we do, and the fruits of practice become obvious, I think, to all of us who are mostly practicing at Tree Leaf, or else we wouldn't stay here and continue to practice here. But there's definitely barriers to our acceptance in institutionalized Zen in general. There's a resistance to our practice being mostly online and our teaching being mostly online. Do you find that to be the case? I know your experience with this is new, but what would you suggest to us to help to break those barriers down and have people find us and join our practice and not see us as a separate entity from the rest of the Zen world?
Really good question. So I think that the most important thing is to, in fact, do the practice you're doing, which is wonderfully inclusive practice, inclusive in a way that is escaping the rest of the institution. Escaping is an interesting word. In moving to a rural area, I told a priest friend I was deinstitutionalizing myself. But of course, we have inherited these wonderful traditions, and we maintain them and they nurture us. So, not to get purist about anything. To do your practice, to persist with confidence that tree leaf practice is vibrant and alive, that Buddha Dharma is alive here at Tree Leaf. To look to each other. I'm just astonished at the breadth of the Tree Leaf Sangha. You have many wonderful Sangha brothers and sisters to look to. Sometimes it's easier to see worthiness in others before we see it in ourselves. But to see the worthiness of the practice, the tree leaf practice in all of your Sangha brothers and sisters here, and to know that they're reflecting back to you the worthiness of your own practice. To let them be mirrors for you. And the rest of the world may or may not come along. I hope that it will. And maybe it will. You win some, you lose some. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of justice is long and slow, but it bends towards justice. And I hope that's true. And in more ways than one, as an American. But turn the light and shine within and see the worthiness and the strength and the value of your own practice. And then shine that out to whoever is right in front of you. And that's the most important thing, is doing the practice.
If I may, before we take another question, Reverend Kenshin, I noticed you were ordained in the year 2000, which isn't so long ago. Mm-hmm. And I take it you had a life before Zen as well?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell us a little about the winding road that may have led you to ordination and to take this path?
Yeah. I have felt from childhood that I have that there's a way to say it that it sounds a little funny, but that I have a spiritual vocation, that this is what my life is about. But I didn't know quite how to manifest it for a long time. I was raised in a church-going family, so I followed that path for a while. And I would have ordained as an Episcopal priest if they'd been ordaining women, but they weren't. And that was a little bit of a wake-up call to me. Another wake-up call that was happening around the same time was that I read the Tao Te Ching, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, whoa, this is telling it like it is. This is where I belong. But it took me a long time to find other people to practice with. I was in the Midwest. There wasn't anything going on. So one of the things that happened along the way was that I, in the 70s, was a part of the Back to the Land movement. That's where Do-Yu and I got to know each other. And I began to really be exposed to more Native American and other earth-based spirituality, which resonated. And I began to know more about Zen. But still, I didn't have a way to go. So the way that I did go was that I became a special ed teacher. And that taught me an enormous amount. And it's very relevant to what I've been talking about today. The sort of the foundation of special education is, if the regular mainstream way doesn't work, find another way. Don't just say can't. And that with good heart and effort, another way is almost always there. So I've been working with Mahapajapati's story as a woman for a long time. And the focus for this talk actually came to focus on meeting an external barrier, came when I read a poem. Oh my goodness, maybe I get to read you this poem. Are we gonna run out of time, Jundo?
We're fine as long as you're fine.
Yeah. So this is a poem by Tara Hardy called Body Encounters Barrier or Stairs, Not a Metaphor. In the current secretly intentional house, there is cope with condition itself, cannot be underestimated. There is barrier. There is encountering barrier. There is struggle to negotiate barrier while being watched. There is kindly meant offer to help, almost always appreciated. There is kindly meant but no asking first, help that often involves non-consensual touch. There is hypervisibility of body and invisibility of personhood, a neat paradox conjured by inaccessibility. There is don't observably feel anything about any piece, which equals choked down snake of shame, muscle grown in the jungle of unintentionality. There is, during all, cheerfully, patiently, what is apparently unfruitfully, educate, while performing disability in public. Go 10 clicks, repeat. But when the roof, walls, windows, when the floor, floorboards, foundation, when the cup of land that holds the house is love, is welcome. When the nakedly intentional shelter is access, the body, disability, and or Black, brown, trans, non-binary, queer, Muslim, fat, elder, child, carbon-based and breathing, valued simply for being, and never demand for government document. There is no barrier, no encounter of it, no being watched, no aid, consent, no shame, never blame. Visibility, right-sized, equals neighbor, not stink. Repeat of this life is clean skate on frozen lake. Imagine the beloved who needs assistance, vacuuming saliva from her mouth, always has a willing hand, holding hose. Backup heart, whose intention is set on weatherproof interdependence. This is the house, the land, the world, of access, of welcome, of here. You belong here. So she really told it.
Thank you. Do we have another question from anyone present here? All right, I'll read quickly one that was sent by PM. If anyone has another question at home, a quick one, please PM me at Treeleaf. It's from Catherine. She says, "Thank you for a lovely talk. It was very encouraging to me. I have agoraphobia, which makes it very hard for me to be with other people. And let me read this. I've forgotten my glasses. I've forgotten everything this morning, including my glasses. It has made me difficult, I'm going to summarize a little, to practice with others. Do you think I'm missing something by not being able to go out and practice with other people and needing to be at home?"
I don't think you're missing the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is always accessible to all of us. That said, we're limited human beings. All of us have different kinds of limits, and they mean we are missing something. And that comes with the territory of being a human being in a body, in a mind, in a brain. I think that's a inescapable part of the human condition and part of what the Buddha was pointing to in the first noble truth, which is suffering exists. It comes with the territory. It comes because we feel we're missing something that we want, or we have something we don't want. It looks different for each of us. And there is an end to that suffering. That's a part of the Four Noble Truths as well. And at the heart of the matter, how wonderful to have this Sangha where you belong.
Another question or any greetings from anyone to Reverend Kenshin? Somebody wave a hand if you have a question. Shokai.
I'd just like to thank you for being here and relating this wonderful story to us. I don't really have any questions, but the thing that I'm getting out of it, the takeaway, is that the greatest barrier that we have is our own lack of intention. And I think in terms of how I got into this, started 25 years ago, and I just sort of lurked around and watched what was happening and so on and so forth. It took a while before I realized that I could do this. Um, Originally, I was very reticent to get into it and get involved and so on and so forth. But I really appreciated the benefits that I got from Zazen, doing Zazen. So eventually, I broke down that big barrier within myself and got into it. But thank you for highlighting that. This is to me what you've said today.
That's a good note. Geshe, sorry.
Well, I'm thinking about a conversation that Doyu and I had just a little while before we started here. And it goes back to Jakuden's question. I had to sort of lean into with glasses. And it had to do with the question about the importance of body-to-body practice, face-to-face, in-person practice, and how this is something that in the institutional setting is very ingrained. And the view that some people have that that's essential. And allowing for some value in that without making it essential. Finding the, not making it into a barrier, but another feature that is present in some situations and not present in other situations. It's at the heart of the matter, it's not a salient variable, as we would say in special ed. It's not, you don't have to have it in order to achieve as Chokai was just saying, the intention that's at the heart of the matter. And I'm just feeling so much heart and clarity in this Sangha, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jundo, for getting up in the middle of the night.
On that note, I'll just thank you again for coming. As you know about our Sangha, we do have priests. I like to say we're an island of misfits, but basically we're an island of people who spend a good deal of time in bed or in the hospital or dealing with the doctors. We have priests with balance issues. We have one priest who sometimes cannot get out of bed. Doyu, she's your priest who's coming. She has mobility issues, I know. We have also folks with various age and restrictions, and just trying to make a place for all of them to do what they can. Just to give you an example, with our priest with the vertigo, cannot do bows. So she just moves her hand when she wants to bow. That's because she cannot move her head very much sometimes. That's how we roll around our Sangha. So your talk was incredibly poignant for us today. And I want to thank you so much. It is about opening barriers. One thing I do want to say is there's no excuse for the teacher who I completed was 2 o'clock in the morning, and because of age, who fell asleep while the computer was booting this morning and woke up 5 minutes after he was supposed to greet his honored guests. I'm glad you mentioned that the Buddha sometimes made mistakes, because I sure put my foot in it sometimes. But thank you for being so forgiving, Kenshin. And I just want to welcome you back another time, anytime you can. We'll do this if you ever can. And the next time, thank you for inviting us just to be witnesses and honored guests, not honored guests, witnesses at an honored event in April for
Yes.
Doyu's ordination. We'll all be watching, hopefully using this kind of system.
We've figured out some of the glitches now, I think, at least on our end. And I'm much more comfortable with it. It's really quite comfortable. Thank you. Thank you for enlarging my world.
Yeah, there are so many wonderful teachers out there, and this is an opportunity for us to get to know people that might, how to say, do what a Zen teacher should be, and be kind of sometimes a little bit not so public. And you seem like a very private individual, and the way your sangha is managed by you. And I want to thank you for coming out and giving us your time today.
What a joy.
On that note, it is for me 3:30 in the morning, and I want to say we've had people here from Ukraine. I think it's more for you. Ukraine is 5:30 in the morning there. I think you've been up all night, and we have our friends in Europe here too. Thank you, Kote, for being here, and I think there might be one New Zealander here. I'm not sure. Thank you again for your time, and we will do this again sometime. Thank you so much, Kenshin.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll say good night, good morning to everybody. See you all. Thank you, Kenshin.
Thank you. Let's see. Here we go.
Yes, I believe me.